nice to welcome you, Maxim, and please
thank you for the invitation.
Tell a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do and how you're connected to classical music.
Yeah, so I'm the general manager of Modernt, and I work for orchestra, for Hubert Ticciati, for the Modernt Foundation here in Stockholm. I was born in Russia. I grew up in Czech Republic, and I studied music. I studied classical guitar as a professional musician. But actually, then shortly before I graduated from the university, I decided basically to focus more on a sort of managerial career, and I ran a small guitar festival in Prague first, and then I was lucky enough actually to end up at Bärenreiter Music Publishing House, where I spent almost 10 years. And then actually I moved to London, where I spent 4 years working for HarrisonParrott, arts management company, and then I ended up here in Stockholm working for this wonderful orchestra and wonderful people from Modernt. So this is my background and my story very, very briefly.
Yeah, so you have obviously a lot of experience managing musicians, managing orchestra.
Well, I think I was fortunate enough actually to gain very different experiences over the years actually, and I think I started with something very, very, very small actually, like a classical guitar series actually in Prague, and when we were trying to invite really great young, top players to Prague, and then obviously music publishing industry was something completely different, all these text editions and musicology, and I went through the whole company from sales department to a director of performance promotion, and then I thought a very logical place for me would be to be an artist manager or work in the artist management. And that was a dream, I have to say, actually, and I think it was an amazing opportunity, actually, to be in London for a couple of years and work for such a global company, and to work for a number of amazing international artists. And I think now it's something completely different, but something extremely challenging, I think it's very fulfilling actually, and it was obviously the last 2 years were extremely difficult for us, but I think it didn't kill us, so it made us even stronger now, and let's see what the future brings then.
For people who do not know, like me, what does a manager do?
You mean the orchestra manager?
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's obviously quite a complex question, and it could be different, if you work for a big orchestra or you work for a small independent organization. I have to say that we actually, or I have quite a large portfolio actually, and I don't work only for the orchestra, as I said, because Modernt is not only the orchestra, is a foundation with different activities actually, and as you probably know, we run the annual festival, we run Modernt Academy for young students, we have Modernt Composition Award. We are planning now actually a series in our new home here in Stockholm, which will be the brand new Queen Sylvia Hall. So it's sort of quite a substantial agenda that I do actually. But purely from the orchestral perspective, of course, I'm overseeing the operations, I'm overseeing the logistics, and I work very closely with our logistical team, and of course my responsibility is also to find new concerts and new opportunities for Modernt. So this is basically what I'm doing, but it's also the financial responsibility, and of course funding is extremely important for us, and it's difficult, and we are applying actually every year for various funding. So that's also important part of my job.
Of course, Modernt is already it's an established orchestra, it's an established organization, so you have a name, you have a great story, and you have a great leader and great musicians inside. But in the orchestra, how do you now go about finding concerts? How does one, how do you as a manager, how do you find concerts? How do you organize them into tours? Is it all personal connections, or do you contact people that you don't know at all to organize a concert? How does one organize a concert for an orchestra?
But to say how you find concerts actually. Well, I mean it's always complex and always different actually how you do this. Of course I was fortunate enough to build quite an extensive network of contacts over the years. So of course it's sometimes very easy for me to get in touch and propose a concert or a program. And of course we also work with some agencies, so that's also important, of course. And I think it's still good to have a representation actually, even though it's also good to have some freedom. So we are trying also to find an ideal model for this. But I mean, it's I think it's always important, I would say, to go or to approach particular people who are in charge. No matter if you know them or you don't know them, it's always easy to introduce, but I think you always have to be personal and contact relevant people and communicate relevant information and give them some interesting information, or even sometimes ask for thoughts or advice. And I think it's always good to be concise, and always good basically to invite, to read, not to overwhelm people with information or huge portfolios or reviews or whatever, but basically be very concise and invite them to see something interesting, to see you in action, always to give a very good reference, because this really works when you can say, we just have performed here, and you can ask this person about us, and this really works. Or or to say, I'm contacting you on the recommendation of someone you know very well. So I think this is always very important when you contact people, and these are, I think, very basic principles that are applicable to not only when you work as a manager for an orchestra, but also when you are a musician and you want to approach an agent or promoter or someone.
Yeah, this is a great subject which you just started. I would like to ask a bit more about this. So, as a musician, can you by yourself, what do you think, a musician, can you organize your own or find your own concerts, approach by yourself organizers or concert organizations or venues, and find opportunity to perform there alone? Or do you really, it's not a reality?
Well, I think at the beginning for sure. Of course, when you perform at the very high level, probably it's less likely, or probably it would look a little bit odd, I think, if you approach, let's say, a very big organization and you offer a solo recital or something like this. So this is not customary, but it's not impossible. I think it depends how you do it, basically. Well, I think it's definitely possible, and I think you just have to do it in a smart way, actually. And I just have to say, maybe I will repeat myself. Especially when I was an agent, so agents are receiving offers and proposals all the time, and basically the venues and promoters too. And people tend to overwhelm with information and with text. So sometimes it's really huge, and people don't have time to read all this, really. And so I think very often the less the better, actually. But I think what really works is that you go to particular people, you give them very particular and relevant references. So always good to find out, do they know some people you know, for example. I think you also need to have a very good reason why you are contacting particular venue or promoter. Is there any connection or something? And so this I think it's this is very, very important. And then I think the best way, again, not to overwhelm with the information, but to say you are welcome to go to my website, or you are welcome to see some clips, and just to add some links, and to say, and the best thing you can do is to say, I'm playing a concert next week, would you like to come and see me? So I think these are very important principles of how to do this.
Absolutely. So
And then I think it works actually. But also it takes time to build relationships. You can approach someone, and then it may take a couple of years actually before you can do something together. And then maybe you'll see each other, you'll have a coffee, or maybe he'll come to your concert, or you'll meet somewhere else, or he will call someone to ask for a reference or recommendation, and then suddenly he'll call you and tell you, why don't you come and play here?
That's great. But it's then so like it's like really not to be afraid to build a connection and to talk with someone and just to propose what you have to propose, because I think
I think if you have to if you're confident enough that you can offer something interesting, you don't need to be shy, or you don't need to be afraid of this. So you can do this. I think it's just important to follow the things that I just have mentioned,
exactly.
Actually. And you will be surprised that people are doing the same mistakes all the time.
Absolutely.
When they are, I don't know, sending generic emails, or they are writing to all people in the organization, and they are writing huge, very long,
like 52-page PDF file with all the projects.
Yes. Very very professional portfolios, but with repertoire and everything. But this is not how it works really. So I think what really works is you need to be direct, and you need to build relationships, and you need to know why you want to talk to particular people, and you have to make use of your network. So if you have a famous teacher, ask him for recommendation, or mentions that this person can recommend to you, for example. And it's important, to just to follow the sort of the very basic logic here, I think.
But how do you feel that so this famous teacher winning a competition, being noticed by a famous big conductor or conductress, and taken on tour with a London Symphony Orchestra, Berlin Phil, is it? Of course, it's still the case that it's a great way to success. Yeah. But is it the only way? Or like now living in such an open world with the internet and where the whole world is your potential audience, is it still the only way of making it or not?
Well, I think it's a puzzle today actually, and I think none of this could somehow exist on its own. So you can win a competition, but there is no guarantee actually you will succeed as an artist. And same with the famous teacher, and it's the same with if you're a protege or something like this, because people can definitely help, but if you are not good enough, or if you don't radiate something special, or if you are not touching people with your music, nothing will help you, and nobody. So I think it's definitely important to have a good teachers. Definitely, it's important maybe to try some competitions, and if you're successful, it could be a good leverage for sure. If someone can help you and open some doors, be it an agent or a teacher or someone, of course it will always help. But I think today it's a lot also about sort of your personality and who you are. If you are open-minded, if you are entrepreneurial, if you want to learn, if you want to travel, if all this, I think is very, very important if you are, if you know something about promotion and marketing, how all this works, how the music industry works. So the more educated you are, sort of the better. So I think this is very, very, really very, very important today. So just to answer your question, it's a very complex issue. And I think, in addition to all this, what you have mentioned, it's really about musician, really about you today.
I love it that you said about being entrepreneurial today and learning about marketing and learning about how to present yourself, how to tell your story, right, and how to. It's fantastic because I find maybe sometimes like marketing is a dirty word, and we as musicians maybe often don't think about those things. And it's amazing if you already have a manager or an agent, or if there is someone already doing that for you. Of course, you don't need to do it by yourself.
It's
sure.
great.
But probably 95% of us are on our own, right? And
I think it's important for every musician to have some knowledge about this and how it works. And I think maybe it should be like some basic of the music management should be part of the curriculum actually as
yes,
music
exactly.
academy, so that people know something about the music industry basically.
Yes, but it's also like so. Today, everyone is a publisher, right? Yeah. Everyone is a publishing house because as an orchestra or as a solo musician, you have a website, you have social media, you have podcasts, whatever there are so many opportunities to tell your story. So everyone is a publisher. If you only publish things about yourself, maybe it gets old quite fast because there is only that many things you can say about yourself before starting to repeat. So I find that we as musicians and as organizations, we need to find content that is in our field, that is about us, that is interesting to people who are our audiences, and then share that content that is maybe not so much about me or my concert tomorrow, but that is around the subject, and to build a really meaningful relationship with people, then they would be interested in you, no? Because
I think today probably the most successful artists are also, influencers actually,
exactly,
and then they can. I think it's important, and it also attracts their attention when they, they talk about different things, and they talk about environmental issues, or some social issues in their country. So they support young students, or they do something else, or they support children in some problematic neighborhoods or something. So I think that's also very, very important. It's also part of it, because I think today you can't be just focused on your instrument and your next concert. It's much more actually. And I think it's also part of your personality, your approach. And I think people are generally interested and genuinely to hear the stories, and I think people want stories today, and it's
Absolutely.
also it's also important. So if you are not very interesting as a personality, then of course you can be a wonderful and great artist, but I think you would be much more successful artist if you manage to create some stories and convey actually some stories about you, your family, what are you doing. And actually today it's really not only about music, and you have to be socially responsible, for example. I think that's also important if you are really big artist.
Yes, and so as if you need to tell stories, today there are so many platforms to tell the stories about. So social media for musicians, is it a necessity? Website, social media?
I think so, and I have to say I think there is nothing wrong about self-promotion. You just have to do it in a smart way, and it can't be very aggressive, and you have to it must be smart and interesting, I think. But of course, if you are a musician and you want to be present, I think you need to be present online today. There is no other way, and especially if you want to attract younger people or people of your generation, I think it's just important to be online, and you have to find the right channels for it. But and today I think we have social media, of course, and we have platforms like Patreon, actually, where you can basically also present concerts or masterclasses or whatever you like to present or have a conversation. So I think this is all works very good, and this is all very important, because today it's just the way we live. If we need some information, we go online, probably, or the majority of us would go online.
Absolutely.
And if you can't find if you can't find a website today, it's already odd. So you say, oh, well, this is something strange about this artist or orchestra organization if you can't find a website, and also if the website is not really good. It's the first sign that something is wrong, really. And I think if an artist is not present today, then it's just difficult, actually. So it's difficult for him to attract new audiences, to interact with people, with his followers, to promote himself. And I think for promoters, of course, it's very difficult to find information about him, and for him to work with promoters. So you probably, once we communicate via emails, mainly via emails today, so it means that we just need this, probably.
Yeah. Do you find, from your point of view, and does the follower number count, or like is it a vanity project to, get the 50,000 followers on Instagram?
Well, I think you don't have to do it for the sake of it, and it's not about like really the numbers. I think it's the same in the arts. You don't do it for numbers. You don't think about like, or you don't count how many concerts you have every year or every season. That's not really the crucially important things. You just need and want to do what's important for you, and to focus on music, and to do the repertoire you want to do, or the programs or projects you want to do, and it doesn't really matter if you do 5 or 10.
And it's the same on a concert. If you as a musician, if you are interesting, if you bring interesting programs that has more meaning behind it, rather than just like, well, I know this concerto, I gotta play it, or like, oh, this is the most famous piece of music written for piano, so I'm gonna play this. No, like if there is a meaning behind it, the audience will come, and also the audience will stay with you, because you attract the audience who is interested in this. And so I think it's very important for us to start think as musicians, to maybe become a bit more entrepreneurial in this way, and to think like, okay, what do I offer as a musician? What does it make me different from all of my friends, and all of other groups?
And I think it's crucially important to think about it, because especially when we are talking about violin or piano, there are thousands of wonderful musicians, skillful musicians. They all have incredible technique. They can play Mozart concertos when they are 5 or 6.
Yes.
So how would you stand out of the crowd, actually? But this is, of course, difficult, because this is about your personality, energy, your talent, something special about something you can't describe, really. Sometimes, when someone comes on stage, even before he starts playing, you can see it's something special about him, or it will be special. And this is something, this is a talent or something very special. So I think, but it's important to think about all this, and I think eventually, when you reach certain age and certain level, then it's important what you're able to communicate with your music, and then I think the more you know actually about this world, not about music, but actually the more experience you have, the more you know, the more you read, the better, and then you have something to tell. Because if you only play notes, then people will probably recognize very soon that you have nothing to tell. You have been only pursuing your career, and this is not something that would attract them, actually.
We can pursue the careers, but we need to, while we are doing that, we need to still have something like interesting to tell people. And
Yeah, and this is basically this is the art actually, when you have something to tell, but to have something to tell you have to experience something in your life actually, and not only practice 10 hours a day. Otherwise then you don't have much to tell actually.
Yeah. By the way, Modernt has an amazing story, and I love the way that it's being told, because when I went on your website, first of all, it's really just incredibly beautifully done website, and it fits so well with the whole concept of Modern, and also just the stories that you say there, about the orchestra, about the aim of it, about the even the meaning of the name itself, which has so many meaning hidden in that one word, It's fantastic. I love that story. By the way, if anyone wondering what the noises are around, so we are now in Sweden, in Stockholm, in a concert hall called Bärenreiter-Verlag, and we found a nice little spot in a restaurant here, and the restaurant is getting ready for the service before the concert. So if you're wondering what it is, it's the sound of the cutlery being nicely put on the tables. But anyways, coming back to to marketing.
Yeah.
How do you and how does a Modern approach this subject, marketing side of it? Do you have a dedicated team for it, or because you don't, or at least the orchestras often, we don't need to advertise our own concerts. We don't need to advertise our events, right? It's a job of a concert hall where we perform our venue. But do you do some marketing by yourself also?
Well, I mean, of course we are trying to do our best. We don't have a huge team, obviously, so it's we have a wonderful colleague who's in charge actually, and we work very closely together. Well, I mean, of course, it's much less work when you have a guest performance somewhere, because it's basically the venue responsibility or the festival's responsibility to do this. But of course, you still have to be, to do something on socials, on your website, for example, and to gather reviews and to work with reviews afterwards, for example. So you still have to do something. But of course, we also organize the annual festival here in Stockholm, and of course, it's quite important, of course, and I think we are trying to follow all the trends and to do whatever we can do, basically to promote really the festival and attract the audiences, which was quite difficult actually this year after the pandemic, and it's a global trend actually that it's difficult to get people back, or all the people back actually, because some of them simply don't come back for various reasons actually, and it will take another couple of years, I think, before the venues and promoters will manage to rebuild the audiences.
Well, this is also, I think, this is a very important subject, because obviously pandemic was a huge crisis in the world and for classical music, and yes, audiences are not coming back in the same numbers. I think it's also a great opportunity, to talk to a new kind of audiences, to talk to younger audiences, to talk to people who maybe didn't come before to concert halls. And I think that, I can't give numbers now, maybe I put them later, on a video, but there is enough of younger audiences, for example, on Spotify, who listen to classical music, but they don't go to concert halls. Yeah. So how do we bring them in? How do we communicate with them in such a way that they feel like it's not scary to go to a classical music concert? You don't need to go all dressed up and know everything about Mozart, to go there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Spotify actually is now, I think, offering some new tools like text, like pictures, of course, the diaries. So this is, I think, one way here to also there is some room for sort of improvement on Spotify, for example. But this is, I think, exactly why you need social media and some other platforms or digital platforms actually, where you can attract new audiences. And of course, you have to talk about things you are doing, and you have to be creative, I think. And I think you have to develop new concert formats as well, and you have to talk to people. Yeah. Because, I think it's the days when you just come on stage and perform gone basically, and people are much more interested in some sort of interaction when they come somewhere. They want musicians to talk to them. They want to know more about this music, and sometimes, as a matter of fact, they just listen. They would listen in a completely different way if they knew something about this, and that's why we have these formats like listen twice or something like this. And I think it's nothing wrong about this actually, because you can't expect that you will have people who are very knowledgeable about classical music. And I think today we just have to try and attract wider audiences, and we need them actually. We need new people to come actually, and that's why we have to develop new formats, and that's why we also have to make, I think we have to make performances much more interactive actually, and we can do this.
Exactly what you say, the interaction with the audience. When from the concerts where the soloist or a conductor or a concertmaster would stand up and maybe talk to the audience, tell a little bit about the piece, maybe show a little bit, okay, so you're gonna hear this theme and this is representing this and that. So this little communication would make people, first of all, you break the barrier between this stage and the audience, but second, you let people something to focus on. You guide their attention to something that they can really, oh, and now I recognize it, you just played it. And then it becomes for people much more interesting, and they come back for the second and the third time.
And also people can build, some relationships and some sort of attachments to the artists, which I think is also very important, and they can also get to know them as people.
Yeah.
And then, you can do different things. You can do pre-concert talks. You can do do some CD signatures. You can do post-concert talks. You can do, if an artist can play folk music or traditional music, he can do a late night concert after the main concert or something, which could be much less formal, and he can interact with people a little bit more. So there are different tools how you can do this, but I think it's very important, and I think basically the trick here is that how you get people who would come to a Harry Potter concert, how you get these people to a concert with the Brahms Symphony, or at least, of course not all of them, but at least some of them, and how you basically attract new people. And this is, I think, a very, very important question today.
But exactly, now you don't even need to. Of course, it's amazing if we could start properly that on a concert we talk to our audience, and we build a relationship with them. But at the same time, like now, everyone has the Instagram and website and Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, and it's you can tell all of the stories there. You can before the concert, like rather than to publish 10 times, like, oh, in 10 days we go to this concert hall and we play this concert. Oh, in 9 days we're gonna be here. Oh, at 8 days, maybe then every day just to publish a little bit about one piece, and then next day about another piece, and then next day about another. And if you play modern music by a modern composer, or maybe like a arrangement by some modern musician, to have a few words from this arrangement. What does it arrangement stands for? What is? I think this is a way to really communicate some value
absolutely,
to be interesting also.
Absolutely. And again, people like stories, and they need and they want to know what's behind all this actually, how this work actually has been created actually. So
also, like an orchestra can have just the same interaction. There is always like one person in the orchestra who loves to talk, and who who loves to talk. Let them chance. Maybe now my colleagues would love me much more because I will leave all of my energy here. I would be very quiet on rehearsal. But it's everyone is a storyteller. Everyone is a storyteller, and everyone has a platform. You don't need to wait for some big publisher to publish your book. You don't need to wait for New York Times to take your interview. Like everyone, you have a story to tell. You just say it. You don't need permission.
Depends, of course, on how much capacity you have, if you can do this, or different things. But I mean, you definitely can. If you want to do this, you don't have to be afraid, I think, and you definitely can do this. And there are people who can do this very, 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 very well.
Young musicians, if they were listening to us now and they are wondering, okay, so how can I, as a musician with an idea, with a story, how can I get more audiences, more performance opportunities? Yeah, how do I get on stage? What can they do to get there?
It's, yeah, I mean, it's obviously difficult, and everyone has a different background and different possibilities, of course. But I think it's very, like, if I start from sort of from scratch. So you imagine you are still at the university or Academy of Music or something like this. My advice would be to prepare for a real life. And because I think many people and many talented musicians are just focusing on, on solo careers, and they're dreaming like about Carnegie Hall and where they're going to perform as soloists. But as a matter of fact, and this is just a reality, only a few of them will succeed as big soloists. Actually, only a few of them. And I think it's important for everyone, basically, to be sort of prepared for the future if you want to pursue a career in music. And I think it's very difficult, actually, to be a musician today. And that's why I think you have to learn languages, you have to travel, you have to learn something about music business if you want. I think, you need to do a lot of chamber music. And of course, if you are an orchestral musician or potentially orchestral musicians, also try youth orchestras to play in the orchestra at the university, because I think these chamber music and orchestra, these two things will give you an incredible experience, actually. And I think many of musicians will just need this experience. And I feel that many musicians or students just underestimate this a little bit, and they are just playing big concertos, and they are focused very much on this. And maybe this is a problem a little bit of the system, actually, that if you go to university, they basically prepare you to be a soloist, but it's only maybe 5% of people who will become soloists. So I think maybe something needs to be changed here, actually. Yeah. So I think all this is very important. Then what I forgot to mention, and I think in addition to teachers or competition, or if you are a protege of someone, I think what really works, it's as simple as word of mouth. So if you're a good orchestral musician and you play somewhere, musicians talk to each other, even from different orchestras. So people will, if you're really good, people will know. And it's the same with conductors, it's the same with orchestras, and because the festivals talks to each other, and the promoters, venues talk to each other. So this really works, I have to say. Yeah. And then I think what is important today, of course, you need to be good, but as I said, you have to be smart, savvy, entrepreneurial, open-minded, innovative, creative, yeah. Basically to succeed today in this world. And then of course it's also important, if you're a good networker, for example, if you can really build relationships, build connections, if you have some sense of diplomacy, for example, you can talk to people. Also, if you have a good website, if you're present online, if you are able to play with other people. So I think that all helps, and then you can build on this, and you can try to get a very good agent who could work for you, or try to establish a very good relationship with a maybe one concert venue where you can start somehow, and then it would give you something to begin with. So I think I think it's just important to think sort of out of the box. Yeah.
I love
today.
it also. I love it that you touched on this subject a little bit before, when you said when you approach an agent or a manager or a concert organization, you need to be personal. You can't just copy paste email and send to all.
And not to and this is, believe me, this is really happening every day, that people are I just have a feeling that people are thinking, okay, I need to find an agent. Okay, why don't I sell an email to all agents I can Google
Absolutely.
Google online, and this never works.
Yeah,
Really.
and I think like it's and maybe then people sometimes get scared like, oh, but I do not know this person personally, like how do I talk with them personally? But we are now almost everyone is online, like if you want to approach someone, maybe go to person's Twitter feed, go to person's Facebook feed, go to Instagram, read the post, not just scroll through, read the post, read what is the person interested in, comment on something, reply to something, retweet, like reshare. Get a little
I
bit.
think it's important to do some sort of research.
Absolutely.
And to really have an idea why. And I think if you do the research and you think about it, you will find something or someone absolutely who is somehow connected to you, or someone you know, or someone who knows you, or there is another meeting point or something like this. So I think this is basically, it's crucially important, I think, just in music business, basically, and this is applicable to everything, basically, that you need to find something. And I remember when I started to work at HP, and very experienced manager told me, when you write to people, you always, and when you want to send an update, or you want to sell someone or something, you have to come with something new and interesting. Mm-hmm. So if you write to someone, say, I have an interesting update for you. So this is something new that's happening, and this is very, very important, basically, that you communicate something and you attract some attention. So I just don't want to repeat myself, but I think this is the way to do it, and you don't need to be afraid of it. You just need to be smart and do some research and find the right channel to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was amazing to talk to you. Like
Well, thank you for the invitation.
No, it's great, and thank you for being my very first guest. Maxim, you are the first
I'm
guest.
The very first one. Okay,
it's the first guest on a podcast with no name.
It's an honor.
No, absolutely, it's an honor for me, and I wish you all the best with Modernt, and looking forward to to hear you on concerts, and also maybe taking a part in some of them.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you with us, to have you on board.
Thank you, Maxim.
Thank you.
We meet again, I hopefully one time when everything is much more professional. We have big cameras, huge microphones, and we do it like in a...
We do a huge panel discussion somewhere in Riga.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.